Hello, I'm Noir Nerd, and I thought I'd do something a little bit different with this video. So I recently started working on a Unity project. Started off as I wanted to create a project which was exploring how to do pathfinding within Unity, which is not something I've done a great deal of. And as I started doing that experimentation, I came up with this idea of creating a game, another variation on maze games which I've been creating recently, but I'm trying to base it around the concept of AI, I suppose, because it is contemporary, it's in everyone's minds, I suppose. But also I had this idea, the concept of cannibalizing AI, so AI, like sort of superior AI, is cannibalizing smaller fragments or cubes to make, I don't know, whatever it is, this huge homunculus AI. So I came up with a rough game concept. I mean, the footage that's playing now is just, I was early on in that process, sort of working with the same shaders that I worked on a bit with Z Malfunction, which is a previous project I was working with Heat Assembly on. And I quite like that look, so I've had a lot of fun actually just playing around with those concepts of like how do you utilize that graphic, right? So obviously there's a lot going on here, like in terms of design, ideas, prototyping. What I wanted also to talk a bit about in this vlog is vibe coding as well. So just how to rapidly prototype using vibe coding, which again I still have like really, I almost like have a guilt about doing that, but in this case with using Unity it actually does make sense to a level to do that, though whether I'm actually shooting myself in the foot in the future remains to be seen. But as I'm still learning how to use really Unity's scripting API and use C# for Unity, it actually does make quite a lot of sense, and I think it has helped with my continued learning and experimentation of Unity, to be honest. It's helped me in many respects, and obviously I think with, I'm just using ChatGPT to do a lot of the coding work, none of which I'm on actually at the minute in the time lapse. I'm just experimenting with the Tron visuals and stuff. Obviously did spend quite a bit of time, and it was very like rewarding just doing that, just because it's a really interesting aesthetic to work with. You'll see later what I actually ended up with in the end, which is somewhere between a traditional wireframe black and green and a more solid look, I guess, with some other elements. Prototypes, again, I know I've gone off track a bit. So like I said, the concept of the game is the idea of you've basically got to save these little guys with the inferior AI, so I guess there's a bit of a subtext there about trying to save the underdog, and I've had some ideas about like how am I going to utilize sound as well, so to make you feel empathetic towards the so-called inferiors, I suppose. And the key gameplay mechanic is based around gates, so opening doors to allow these NPCs, I call them in the game at the minute, to get to the exit and escape basically, and then you win each level if you manage to get a certain amount to the exit. Never all, because that would be too optimistic, I think, and you'd have to get the perfect score on every map. So I've sort of, in my game design notes, I've set a limit for each map with a increasing scale of difficulty in terms of like the actual NPCs that you need to get escaped out. And most of the work I've been doing, which is showcased here, as I said, I've done all the design myself. I actually created a lot of the models myself in Blender. Textures are a mix of AI actually, and AI and my own editing within Photoshop, so it's not one or the other, sort of both. Like, I used a bit of AI in Photoshop, and then did editing on Photoshop myself too. A few different shaders, materials. I'm sort of reaching here the actual aesthetic that's currently out of the yellow gates, and this is where I start vibe coding really. So yeah, I mean, I thought I'd reflect a bit on vibe coding. So from when I've been doing these prompts for Unity scripting, it's quite good the amount of instructions you get, but you definitely have to be quite precise, and I've learned definitely as I've gone on, I get better outputs the more I actually understand what to ask for, which makes sense. But it's quite good actually doing it that way, I think, because it just shortcuts all the time that you'd usually have to spend trying to find menu items, and that's one place where I think it's actually really useful for Unity development. It's just sometimes I find, because my background's more Unreal Engine, that Unity's UI I sometimes find a bit like things are just embedded in places you wouldn't expect all the time. I mean, Unreal Engine 2 is a hugely complicated system, but I suppose it's by design. So ChatGPT definitely does help with that. I think just to get quick, you just want to. I mean, it's like the same thing as looking at documentation, right? I mean, you're not doing anything really different to that. You're just getting a faster way of doing it, because I mean, all that data is already available, so may as well use it, right? So I mean, this does actually connect eventually to the original idea I had, which was around pathfinding. So I started getting involved in nav meshes, nav agents, some of which I've done before, but not really in the same way. And I did eventually create a movement script for the NPC and the enemy. So I'm just setting up all that now, and then just prompting for a basic NPC script, and you can see the first bits of movement there. That was nice to get up and going. The NPC enemy is actually NPC model is just a variation of the enemy, actually scaled down a bit, different shape, sort of T shape as well, actually more like a U shape. And then I've just implemented the doors. Going back to just chatting just generally about using ChatGPT. So I think I'm sort of realising where you do reach a bit of a limit though of it, to be honest, because once this code would grow to a certain level, like for this, it's fine. I'm just prototyping. There's nothing here that isn't really a solved problem. And even then, the pathfinding is still really off. And I've had to constantly go and tweak the physics and the actual parameters for the script itself. So even though you get the shortcut of having the basic functionality to have the movement working really fast, you do still have to tweak a lot, especially when you're working within physics systems. It's one of the most interesting parts of it working in any game engine actually, but it's also can be one of the real blockers, I find. Like and there's still concepts I don't fully understand. I'm not a physics student. I'm not really particularly good at mathematics. And I've always been able to get along by knowing enough to get by. And I think programming in general, you don't need to be a complete maths whiz. Of course, I'd say that I'm a front-end web developer for most of my life, but obviously some forms of programming does help. I don't know where I'm going with this. I'll just yabber on for the next 2 minutes about something or other. I will be releasing more videos on this project once it's got some more legs. It's probably just going to be if I get round to it, I've got a month off now from work, I'll release something like a 4 or 5 level game. I've done games like this in the past. Nanomaze was not that dissimilar. It's an old game I made for Android. First games I made for mobile with Unreal Engine. Not a million miles from this, but that was path movements, which are just moving on a set pathing system. Whereas this obviously does take into account positions of various objects in relation to another one, and the path obviously is built on the nav mesh itself, and then it works out the shortest path to get to where it needs to go, and obviously does the translations based in that direction. So yeah, a lot of tweaking. That first time I was working at day as well. Been working in the evening quite a lot recently. I tend to become quite obsessive, to be honest. This is, we're actually viewing here is 4 hours worth of footage, but that's from basically two days more or less. So that's pretty familiar. I think, to be honest, if you really want to do indie game development, you have to be pretty obsessed with doing it, to be honest, to get anything. Now, like, I've never even had a hit, really. I've had games which have enjoyed a few hundred plays and downloads and everything, but I also just am a bit of a polymath, so just distractible, almost like in an ADHD type manner. And doing some beatbox music there, just I've got a distractible monkey brain, really. Anyway, there's been something of interest in this little exploration of prototyping and some of my thoughts on what it is to do the old vibe coding thing. I'm actually really enjoying it, just trying out little prototypes and sometimes occasionally getting interesting results. I feel like I'm learning more about Unity as well and getting better at it as I go along, so as a way of actually learning, I think it's fine. But like anything else, it's the actual learning comes from the failing. But this project does actually seem to be onto something, so it probably will reach some sort of fruition and get an old release on itch.io. I might even slap a bit of money price on it. Nothing too pricey, maybe 1 or 2 quid. See how it turns out. It's the joy of game dev.